Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with James Lancaster, Managing Director of Alderney Electricity. James is shortly stepping down from AEL, so is it our swan song, or is it?
I don't doubt it very much. I
Well, I
doubt
hope
it very
not.
much. It,
Uh,
it, it,
this-
it, it will turn out to be a slightly extended staying
yes,
down,
yeah.
as I'm sure we will detail as we go through
As
this
we go
conversation.
through the list, absolutely. But we go back to 2015, 9 years of putting up with me. You're a brave
We
man.
do, we do, we do, we do. Yeah, yeah. I'm oh, yeah, Key FM, all those interviews we did in those days, sort
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
coming
yeah,
through,
yeah.
and still talking about the same stuff today that we were talking about then.
Well, I think there's been a bit of progress since we started in
Yeah,
2015. I certainly
yeah,
hope
no, it
so.
has. It has. I think it did. I mean, my recollection at the time. I mean, obviously, I was from 2015. I was new to Alderney in a work sense. I joined the company in September 2014.
Yeah.
We had a lot of aspirations and no money at that time. And over the last decade, we have delivered, I think, on most of the aspirations that we had, certainly in terms of building a solid foundation for future development of a more sustainable energy system. So, no, I'm very proud of what we as a team have achieved over the last 10 years. And it's been great fun documenting some of it with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. And in my capacity as chief sycophant,
Yes.
can I say that in my view, there are only two people that I've known in the last 30 or so years that have achieved real legacy in terms of setting out on tasks and getting them done. One is you, and the other is Andre Vilsenac, who, as you recall, picked the thing up
Yeah.
from nothing and made the Alderney Gambling Control Commission into an internationally recognised organisation. So, congratulations, you get the Tony LeBlanc cap. Or cup, or
Thank you.
cup.
Okay. Well, whatever. Let's have a cap. That's much better. Sort of like sort of the caps for international appearances. So yeah, and you've only given out two of those then.
Well, that's right,
Uh,
yes. And I haven't spoken to Andre for about 10 years. We'll have
no,
to
I
get
think
on with that.
Andre's gone on to bigger and better things. I think,
Yeah,
hasn't he?
he's in the States these days. So,
Yeah. So
from
I
that point of view,
understand.
yeah. But there we
Yeah.
are.
I mean, I think. Oh, thank you very much. I should take that. I should simply say thank you. However, perhaps it is sensible to unpack that a little bit. And what I would say is that Andre and I are perhaps unique in having national scale challenges to deal with at Alderney level,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
sufficient independence to be able to get on and do it.
Yes, agreed.
And
And
that's, I
that's
think,
interesting.
what makes the difference. So obviously, AGCC were, a regulatory body. Therefore, by definition, they have to maintain an independence from all other institutions, whether that be the states or the gambling companies or whoever it is. Um, Alderney Electricity derive that independence by virtue of being a limited company. And therefore, the veil is there that sits between the company and shareholders.
Yeah. And
And
I think,
so we've been lucky in that regard.
yeah, that equals success.
It gives it doesn't necessarily equal success, but it does if you've got the right mentality and you are the if you have plans and if you can deliver, then you have the resources to deliver those plans. Then yes, that does equate to success ultimately.
Okay.
I think
Can we take,
what I would.
yeah, sorry,
Sorry.
James. I'm talking over you. Keep going, please.
No, no, not at all. I think, but one of the keys in that is that um, you must accept the potential for failure.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, certainly with what Andre was doing, nobody done it before, not really.
No.
Um, and similarly in Alderney, we have had to make innovation at a grid scale, which whilst Alderney is only tiny, having to manage a whole grid is actually quite unique. And so the capacity for getting it wrong is quite large. I think the danger is if you become overly obsessed by that, if you agonize over your all of your decisions, then nothing ever happens. You just have to get to the point you're saying, do you know what? I don't know, but we've got to do something. We've
Yeah,
got to move forward.
yeah, that's right. So, a certain amount of entrepreneurship has to go
Yeah,
into it effectively, and a little
very
bit of
much.
risk taking goes with it. But I mean, looking at your principal achievements, and you've probably got many more than this, the first one is the grid.
Yeah.
And I mean, that works really well. We can have the wildest weather, but we still got the electricity supply on these days because it's all underground.
Nearly all of it's gone underground, and all of the significant infrastructure is underground now. And the bits that are still overground are reasonably well sheltered where they sit on the island. The Equally, the sort of all the cabling is the sort of connective, um, the veins and the nerves. But then you've got the infrastructure, the substations and otherwise, and we have now upgraded 14 of the 21 original substations, which means that the grid is now operating on updated, compliant equipment, which is new and reliable.
Yeah.
And all the old stuff that still exists actually just sits there untouched and is allowed to do its stuff without interference. So, therefore, no longer contributes to potential outages or otherwise.
But it wasn't that long ago, was it, where German equipment from World War II was still in use?
So we are there is still equipment on the island which was installed in the 50s,
Mm,
and was secondhand when it was installed.
mm.
So we do still have some switch gear which dates probably from the 30s. And some of the old ray roll switches are there, but the point being they're never operated in anger.
Yeah,
So they sit there as purely as a copper to copper connection, and therefore are reliable in that mode. It's when you have to start using that old switchgear that the problems arise from both an operational viewpoint, but also from a health and safety
yeah,
viewpoint. And the primary focus of the grid upgrade that we've done over the last decade was actually health and safety. It
yeah.
wasn't improving the quality of service per se, though that has been a handy byproduct, shall we say.
But you did give it additional capability, didn't you? Sort of
Yeah, yeah,
looking
yeah.
at how things are going to run out in the future in terms of the
Yeah,
electricity demand. So
yeah.
that fits in as well, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. And where we were replacing cable, we have increased the gauge of those cables to mean
Yeah,
that we can move more power around the island now. To do otherwise would have been a false economy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now the other achievement is the automated power station.
Yeah.
And you tell us a bit about what you had to do there because
Yeah.
it's totally
So
different to what it was.
it is. The power station that I inherited in 2014 really was elements of five previous incarnations. So it's normal for this kind of infrastructure to evolve over time. Again, particularly where you are looking at constrained resources. So you can't just completely rebuild the thing, every 10 years. And a lot of the equipment which had been installed over those period of times was reaching the end of its service life. And so we had reached a point where we had no choice but to, and in fact, no choice. The economically sensible thing was to scrap it all and start again.
Yeah,
So that's what we've done. So we have rebuilt the power station from the bottom up. The station itself is in the way that it operates is actually very similar to what's always been there. It is a diesel powered station with diesel engines and generators and switch gear, which looks not unlike what was there previously, except it is modern, it is safer, it operates in a more reliable manner. The real transformation has been the software system that sits behind it, the energy management system. So Alderney now has an energy management system that is being deployed at grid scale. The energy management system is capable of talking to every energy asset on the island, whether on the supply side or the demand side. So as I said before, the system will talk to your toaster if your toaster is capable of talking back.
yeah,
Um, We don't expect to ever roll it out to that level. But what that does is it gives you an enormous amount of control over how energy is managed on the island, how it is moved around, how it is deployed, and how actually ultimately it allows you to put the tools into people's hands to ensure that they can manage their energy demand in the most efficient way for their lifestyles. So, or business styles if it's commercial property. So that's been huge, and that's put us to the point where Alderney now has one of the most advanced energy management systems at grid scale, and I stress that at
Hmm.
grid scale anywhere on the planet right now.
That's incredible, isn't it? And of course, the great
Mm.
thing is that the power station is effectively unmanned at night, isn't it? It will only
Yeah,
only only need people there if something goes wrong.
exactly so. So there are only people there during normal working hours. People pop in, at the weekends just to
Yeah.
check oil levels and things like that. And as we move forward, that may well become a thing of the past as we develop more reliability and more of the functionality that is brought online. But yes, we don't now. The station is capable of managing itself, and we only need to intervene if an issue arises. Which, given that it's modern equipment, and given that we have that level of control over it, one touching wood would hope that those things are few and far. But those times are few and far between now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking back over the last 10 years or so, any major disappointments, or I mean, obviously you're
Um,
having to nudge people on occasions, but generally
uh,
speaking, got it going, didn't you?
I wanted to get more done.
Yeah.
I did. But then you come into any role with a whole, raft of expectation, and you get very excited about it, and you think of all the potential, all the things that you could have done. As soon as you put sort of boots on the ground, you go, oh yeah, okay, it's not quite as rosy as I thought it was. There are things that we are going to have to do that I hadn't realised to the extent to which change was necessary. So I would have loved to have had um, more renewable energy actually on the grid by now.
Mm.
But ultimately, the issue is that you can't add renewable energy to at scale onto a grid until you have the systems in place to manage the variability, particularly with things like wind and solar. As we said, the
Mm.
wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. The wind is gusty, so the fluctuation that you get from both your solar arrays and your wind can be quite significant over a short period to be able to manage that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we had to build all that first, and
Yes,
that took time.
absolutely. But you know,
COVID didn't help. COVID
what
didn't help. Losing 18 months wasn't good.
No, no, absolutely. And disappointment isn't sort of failure because you've got in place, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, various things that the new MD can deal with on
Yeah, yeah.
appointment. Yeah, so from that point of view, um, I guess the staff support has been very important to you.
I couldn't have done anything without it. We have a fantastic team at AEL, and I think the what they have achieved, how they have just embraced the transformation that we have seen as a company is not remarked upon often enough. And I think it's, what they do to support the island is rather invisible to the community. And
Mm,
again, we've discussed this, it's utilities. People take them for granted,
yeah,
but don't necessarily understand what has to happen behind the scenes to ensure that you have clean water, to ensure that you have electricity, to ensure that your sewage is, dealt with efficiently. These are things which don't just happen.
no, absolutely. So from that point of view, um, full marks to everyone on board.
I have a fantastic team, and without that team, we wouldn't have achieved anything.
Have you got a handover date organised yet in terms of
Uh,
where you're going forward with
so
them?
the closing date for applications for my role was last Friday.
Yeah,
We have had about 55, 56 applications.
that's good.
Yes, brilliant. Of which we've done, most of this has been achieved through working social media.
Yeah.
The of those, I would say we have. I haven't done a full review on it yet because it's only closed on
Mm.
Friday. But let's say we've got sort of 12, 13, 14, what I would consider sensible applications where
Yep.
the applicants are quite a long way up the requirements list, or fit with one of the possible scenarios. And there is more than one scenario here, of which I would fully expect to have five or six people who we should um, invite for discussion in the first instance. Now, considering that when I took on the job, actually the company was struggling to find
Yeah. Yeah.
people, and it was a difficult exercise for them. I think that's great. I'm really really pleased by the outcome this time. It's not done yet, but at
No.
least we've got a good starting point
Yeah.
at the date that application's closed.
And a short list of five is pretty good, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I reckon so,
Mm.
and they are all people who have the right background, who have skills and experience which are very, very relevant to the task in hand, and on the face of it, either have connections to Alderney specifically, or at least have worked in remote locations previously, so would not be phased by moving to the island.
And that's important, isn't it? Because, you hear a lot of people that do move to the island, not necessarily for business, but they find a winter very difficult and they find that perhaps one of the two spouses doesn't like the place, the other one
Yeah.
does. It's Marmite, isn't it, from that point of view?
Totally. And we have to also have to recognize that at the point that I joined the company, AEL, Dick Haynes had left a
Mm.
couple, years previously. So there was at that time no sort of single figurehead driving that company forward. And the company's focus really was very much about keeping the fuel flowing and keeping the lights on.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was little ambition being described in a concrete manner to get things done. Yes, the board at that time recognised that change was necessary and had put in place the steps to professionalise the board so that we could deliver future change. But in terms of getting around to detailing what that change looked like, nothing had been done.
yeah,
Now, contrast that with where we are today, and what we do is we've now got actually an offering that is attractive because we put the foundation in, and now we're inviting somebody to come in and do all the sexy stuff.
mm. Absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. You and I had a chat the other day about the bailiwick, and we were sort of discussing Guernsey and Sark and everything else. Do you
Yeah.
think it would make sense to have an electricity utility covering all three islands?
Uh, Short answer, yes. What you actually mean by that is a slightly longer
Yeah,
answer.
sure.
So I think each island needs its own management team, its own operating team. I think you do need people who are actually based on the island who
Yeah,
can talk to local customers who understand the issues that they are seeing. So you're not going to have a decentralized, a centralized utility company sat in Guernsey, for example, dealing remotely with Sark and Orkney. That won't happen. But if we actually look, Alderney Electricity is a company that turns over what, 6 million um, pounds a year. Sark possibly quarter of that. Nobody's quite sure what the finances of Sark Electricity look like at this moment in time because of all the issues that they've been having over there. Um, but Guernsey Electricity is 30 times that size. So the purchasing power which they have um, is significant. And so, in terms of the larger scale, so if we're talking about buying transformers and switchgear or new metering systems or otherwise, it is much easier to go to a supplier and say, well, I'd like 50,000 of these rather than 200 of them.
yeah,
So, at that level, there is a lot of work to be done to be joining up the operations of those three organizations, I think, going forward to make sure that each of the local operating centers is able to deliver energy to its consumers at the lowest possible price. And I think that's absolutely essential. Are we going to call this entity? And I think it makes sense to have some kind of entity, but I don't see it as Guernsey Electricity. I kind of see it as bailiwick energy,
Yeah.
and then AEL and SEL and GEL indeed sit as operating entities within that entity, working very closely together on the things which it makes sense to work closely together, but being very parochial where again it makes sense to do so. That's how I would see it
Yeah.
developing.
I mean,
But
in your case, for example, if it were to happen, whilst you can't actually give them anything like, for example, the way they would give you discounts on procurement, you can give them technical expertise back, can't you? You know, it's a shared
yeah,
situation.
it is exactly so. And there are, I mean, so if you are going, yeah, let's put some numbers on it just to give
Yeah,
you the
yeah.
scale of it. AEL has spent £6 million on network upgrades and the power station upgrade over the last decade. If you take Guernsey, and we've to some extent we've only scratched the surface. As I say,
Yeah.
we've stabilised the platform. Now, if you were going to deliver the same level of functionality to Guernsey, you're not talking 6 million. You're talking, crikey, what are you talking? Nearly
Times
200
30,
million.
times
Well,
30.
yeah, 200
Yeah,
million to do that.
yeah, yeah,
And that's a big number for anybody just to shell out on untried and untested systems.
yeah.
So the idea that you can, so at one level, things cascade down from a cost point of view from the larger islands, but actually things cascade up from the smaller islands where these kinds of developments are actually on a much more manageable scale. So you are prototyping things perhaps in Sark and in Alderney, which ultimately can then, as appropriate, be deployed in Guernsey, because at least they will have confidence that the systems that we're talking about will deliver the benefits that they're looking for.
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, from that
Yeah,
point of view? And
of course it is.
it's not about integration. It's more about being in a situation where I don't know, cooperative.
Yeah, precisely. And
Yeah.
what structure you put on it, it doesn't necessarily need to have several ways you could do this. But I
No.
think the main thing is that people should not be afraid of loss of control because it doesn't really happen that way. I say you always will need people on the ground to deal with your local
Mm.
consumers because the issues are very different across
Yeah.
the three islands. We know that, but it is a two-way street, and knowledge, information, uh, opportunity, expertise flow both ways. And so, in that sense, Alderney has as much to contribute as anybody in this piece. Certainly,
Yeah.
consistent, I would say more to contribute than scale alone would imply.
Yeah. In other words, you can go to them and say, we've created a test bed effectively on a lot of
Yeah,
our kit.
yeah,
You can make take the opportunity. Let's
and
get on to a few of the other bits and pieces because you said
of
that you were
course,
a
of
little
course.
bit disappointed that certain things hadn't come to pass due to certain reasons. Where are you on the solar scheme?
Solar's pushing ahead now. So we have appointed. I mean, I wanted to make sure that irrespective of what was happening with me, with somebody coming in, that project was going to push ahead as quickly as it could. So we
Yeah,
have appointed project managers to run forward with that now. We are. So the next thing that will happen is we do need to write to Building and Development Control Committee just to check that our interpretation of what is required under the law in terms of the level of supporting evidence that the committee will need in order to be able to assess a planning application is correct. But that's just a letter to BDC, and we're preparing that. And that it takes a little while because you can't just sort of write a one pager saying, "Hey, we have to talk about,
much as you'd
you
like
know,
to.
as much as we'd like to. We have to talk about what we're proposing to do. We have to refer that back to the law and say because of this is
Yeah,
why we believe this is the right way. Because the law does gives you options depending upon the scale and nature of the project that you have there. Um, but at the same time, the work that we are doing for that is also work that feeds directly into the planning application. So the next big piece of work on the planning application is sorting out all the environmental impact assessments, which given the location of the land, given the other things that have happened on that land previously, we do not see that as being particularly onerous. And discussions to date with the Alderney Society, with the Bird Observatory, with the Wildlife Trust have reinforced our view. It's not that they haven't raised any issues; they have. They've raised some very sensible points, but I think everybody's approaching that with a very pragmatic view, which is great. So I am hopeful that the planning application for the solar array will go in January, February.
Yeah.
January for consideration at February's meeting. Let's go with the timeline. Um,
Assuming they then give you planning permission, how long to get it
yeah.
up and running?
Well, once planning permission is granted, then we can go straight into procurement. So other things that are running along in parallel, we are looking at the nature of the ground that is
Yeah.
there. One thing to say that you are going to build a solar array in a particular site, but you have to actually check the nature of the ground because that will define what type of systems that you are using for anchoring, for foundations, and otherwise. So we will need to get some equipment over to the island as soon as we can green light it to do push in pull out tests
Mm.
on the pilot structures to make sure that will actually work. We don't see a major problem there, but we have to do it nonetheless. We have to work up an agricultural piece, so there will be an agricultural statement. This has been designed as an agrivoltaic project right from the outset. And whilst AEL have no particular interest in investing in agriculture, I think the community would see it as very cynical if we didn't at least bring forward that agricultural proposal for consideration at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, the And then the final piece that we obviously need to do is we actually need to finally secure the finances for this. We have a very supportive bank manager, and the numbers that are that we've pulled together on both how the company is today, but how the company finances will look post solar installation are very positive, and it is. This sort of project is very, very much in line with the corporate strategies of the large banking institutions, which are very, very keen to invest in green
Green
projects that
stuff.
deliver
Yeah.
benefit at
Yeah.
scale. And so at that level, we tick all the boxes. So I am confident that we will be able to identify a uh, commercial financing package for this,
Mm.
which isn't going to be outlandish. We're not going to have to go off to venture capitals or otherwise to do it. We are talking about standard commercial finance for standard project finance. If there are other opportunities, either through the states of deliberation or states of Alderney, to address some of that funding at lower cost, well, we will explore that. But in the past, we have been able to manage with commercial funding and still deliver the benefits to the community that we've promised. So,
So, what are we talking about in terms of unit price here? Can we stay as we are, or will have to be a slight increase?
So no, 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 no. Actually, what we're talking about is a small decrease in unit cost once the solar has come online.
Yeah.
The cost of generation with solar we expect to be significantly less than the cost of diesel generation, but for a period of time, we nonetheless have to, we have to borrow money to build it. We have to pay
Yeah.
that money back.
Yeah.
So by the time that you take the financing costs into consideration, the net gain is not huge, but that will increase over time because the one thing that we can say is, or I believe that we can say, who knows, is that our fossil fuel prices will rise over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Uh, but and I say 20 years because that's a sensible lifetime for the solar array. Actually, we should push it to 30, but let's say 20 years. And the price of the solar generation over that period of time will largely be stable. So over that time, the benefit will open up. And once the money's paid off, say 10, well, actually, we might borrow money over 20 years.
Yeah.
But what we are seeing is over time, the gap between the cost of renewable generation and the cost of diesel generation will grow.
Okay.
and
And
the island will see its
as far
benefit.
as the customers are concerned, one will offset the other, so the actual effect on unit price shouldn't change in the short term.
No, as I say, I hope in the short term
Could
there
be
will be a
better.
slight decrease,
Yeah,
but over time that
that gets
we will be
better.
able to
Yeah.
show it by comparison where we would have been having not done it, it will be significantly better.
Okay, that's good. What did you think about Michael Turner Samuel's wind proposals?
Um, all these things are great ideas.
Yeah,
The we Alderney have the marine resource is disproportionately large by comparison to the size of the island, and that is
yeah,
very fortunate for the island. And so, whether it is wind, offshore wind, or whether it is ultimately the tidal, should that ever come to fruition, then the island stands to benefit significantly from that. The What we should remember all the time is if there projects at this scale are not designed, cannot be designed to power the island. That's not their primary purpose. These projects are designed to sell bulk power
yeah.
into global, certainly Western European markets, but the way things working these days, they're global markets effectively. And so if there is any power available to come to Alderney, then that is a byproduct of that larger program.
Yeah.
It's the same as we discussed running a cable to France to pick up French nuclear power directly in Alderney. The cost of doing that is prohibitive if we just look at the scale of Alderney's consumption. But if somebody is delivering a project that's going to bring the cable halfway there, then it helps.
Yeah, sure.
So, and you know, the incremental cost of running a cable to Alderney, once you are investing hundreds of millions, possibly billions into infrastructure, well, it's a drop in the ocean.
We've come up with a new tidal firm in recent days, I believe. What do you know
Yeah,
about
have you been
that?
down to look at it? Have you
No,
been
not
down to look
yet.
at
Not yet.
it?
Where is it?
Well, I thought so. I'm not on the island at the moment. I understood that Spiralis
Yeah, I think
turbine
they had.
was coming
Yeah,
on the boat,
yeah.
so
I
it should be
missed it.
down in the harbour
Yeah,
area somewhere.
yeah. I'll make inquiries from that point of view. Well,
Yeah, next time we're going down to the recycling centre, it's probably sat there somewhere.
how does it compare with the ARE scheme? Is
Uh,
it?
well, it's fundamentally different.
It's a
So
floater.
yeah, it sits on a barge and floats and then
Hmm.
sort of dips into the surface of the water. But it is at a scale which is more consistent with Alderney's needs. Now, in the first instance, so I've spoken to Spiralis about it. We at the moment we are not particularly involved with that project because it is still very early stage. And in the first instance, what they're doing is they're bringing the device to Alderney's waters for survivability tests.
Hmm.
So they will moor their barge at a location to be specified, and then they will leave it there. And then when they come back, see if it's still there.
Yeah.
And but until they have done that and have until they have shown that their system is suitable for the kind of hostile environment in which it is designed to operate, then there is no point in investing the extra money to run cable from the device
No,
ashore.
that's understood. Yeah.
Yeah. What I would say at this point is I don't want people to suddenly go, oh well, let's not have solar, let's not have wind, let's wait for tidal to come along. Because at the scale that we are talking, so in terms of the output ambitions and the Spiralis device, there is no conflict. There is no significant conflict. We can have all of them and still
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is no need to delay one program in the hope of something else coming along to replace it.
But nobody, looking at the UK political scene, is really promoting tidal. Not even Mr. Miliband. He's looking at things other than tidal because I guess
Yeah,
they sort of feel that it's not a system that's actually been tested properly.
I do. I think there's a little bit more to you than that. I think at the moment it doesn't really get onto the radar. You have
Yeah.
got a new government in power who are looking at the what they've inherited, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so they have inherited a uh, an energy problem with all the issues which were highlighted by, all the promises made by the previous government, and they've got to go through that. And so what they are looking is mainstream mature technological solutions to get them out of what they might perceive that hole to be.
Quick
Tidal
fix.
is still
Yeah.
Tidal is still a very expensive cottage industry.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, we're running out of time, I'm sorry to have to say. So
It
handover
happens.
date will be dependent on the interviews and everything like that.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
expecting we're expecting to have an outcome if successful in this round by Christmas. So I
yeah.
think we have to assume that the person will have a notice period at Easter time, something like that.
And you're going to provide mentoring services?
Well, there's a sort of mentoring, depending on who comes in, they may
Yeah,
or
sure.
may
Yeah.
not be the finished article. And like I say, we have different scenarios that we have countenance, but either way, there will be a handover period, and it will be a reasonably extensive handover period because there's a lot to hand over.
And the other thing is, of course, you're remaining on the board, yes?
For the time being.
Yeah.
So obviously I will stay on the board. Obviously, I will be reducing my hours
Mm.
back from January the 1st. But the board have asked me to sort of hang around for the time being, and I will hang around, I suppose, while as long as I've still got something to contribute, and until
Yeah.
my successor turns around and says, "I've had enough of you looking over my shoulder, sling your hurt." And that would be a very, very good thing. I've never believed that you should hang on to a position.
No,
I think
that's
you
right.
should.
That's right. I think once you made decisions, you get
Yeah,
on with
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
sort of thing.
You've got to, but but it's also important that you hand over the job while before you run out of things to do. So there is something to hand over. I think people hang on to jobs far too long.
We're going to obviously have interviews in the future about other things, I hope.
Yeah, of course, of
But in the
course.
meantime, can I say it's been a real pleasure to know you, mate? It really has. I've
That,
enjoyed it.
that, that, that- Thank you, Tony. That means a lot. We've had a lot of fun over the years, and it's not going to end just yet. We'll do a
No,
few more of these, I'm
yeah.
sure.
So, all the best for Christmas and a happy new
Yeah.
year and all the rest of it. Many,
Thank you very
many
much, and to you.
thanks. Cheers,
Yeah,
James.
and to you, to yours, and to those of all the families on Alderney.
Thank you very much. Bye.